We are wrapping our part of our special recap of today's closing arguments in Trump's criminal trial. But do not go anywhere. Our coverage continues with the last word and Lawrence O'Donnell, who spent today in court and has the back pain to prove it. Good evening, my friend. Good evening.
I was working on my posture for most of the day, Rachel, in that chair. But look, Rachel, two full reporter's notebooks today. I've never filled up two in a day before, I think. Certainly not a courtroom day. It went on longer than any of us expected. I think longer than most of us thought was necessary. But, you know, it was one of those no stone unturned closings by the prosecution. The defense, I thought, was as effective as they could be given the cards that have been dealt them. They've got some internal contradictions in their theory of the case. But remember, this is a criminal defense team trying to defend Donald Trump. Yeah. Good luck with that. It's going to look pretty messy.
Judge Barchan said at the outset that it is his practice as a matter of running his courtroom. He likes for the jury to get both summations on one day. Mm-hmm. And I felt like heading into today, I was so worried about whether or not there would be other trailing ends from the trial, which sort of ended on the schedule he didn't want last week, and whether they'd be able to squeeze them in. I was thinking each summation would be like 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. When we got 3 hours, and that was the short one, and then 4 hours and 40 minutes as the second one, I mean, it really was an endurance test for the jury. But the judge, who seems to be very bonded with this jury, does seem to think that it is in their best interest that they got them both today, that they didn't have a break, and that when they come back fresh tomorrow, they are just looking at him and listening to him and then getting to work.
Yeah, and the judge did say when this thing was well into overtime that he has been, after the jury left for a recess, he told the lawyers, I've been watching the jury. They still seem to be with us. They still seem to be ready to keep going. And of course, the jury wants to go. They want to get this job done and have it be over with as soon as is reasonably possible for them. And so the judge had already said to them, listen, we might need to go late on Tuesday night. They were warned about that a week ago, so they were ready to go late tonight. And but boy, when we heard the prosecutor say that he maybe had 4 hours of material, I have to say it felt like, we're going to be here tomorrow morning finishing the final summation here. But the judge really didn't want that to happen. And Rachel, just to show you, the judge does have limits to his patience. This is one of those things that you had to kind of be in the courtroom for. In the last, 10 minutes or so of Josh Steinglass's summation that the judge clearly was finished with. Like, this really should be over. There was a moment where there was an objection, Todd Blanchard objection. It was sustained, understandable objection, sustained. And then the prosecutor said, may we approach? Now, every single time that either lawyer said, may we approach in this trial, every single time, they approached the bench and had a bench conference. This time, in the fourth hour of the DA's summation, when he said to the judge, may we approach, there's no word in the transcript because it's just the judge shaking his head no. Just no. Just
talk
no.
To the hand.
Nope, don't approach. Don't even think about approaching.
That's fantastic.
You should approach the exit, is what the judge was letting him know.
I know you need to start your portion of the recap, and this is rude of me to do, but can I ask you one more question about your experience in the courtroom? You have been in the court a bunch of days, and not just in the overflow room, but in the courtroom itself. Do you have a vibe from the jury in terms of what you think, how you think the jury is behaving, whether there might be a holdout or two juror who really isn't paying attention, who might not be there in good faith? Do you feel like the jury is doing a good jury job?
You know, I'm so glad you asked that, because that's exactly how I was about to begin this discussion here.
Okay.
There is, by the way, nothing in the teleprompter tonight. I haven't had a time to write a single word rushing from the courthouse up here. But this is exactly how I wanted to begin, and I'm glad to begin it with you, because I do believe that I've now heard all of the testimony. I've heard every word of the summations. And hearing every word of the summations is maybe the most important thing you can do. If you could pick one day to be there, that would be the day. And so what I can tell the audience, and I can tell you, is I've been in a lot of courtrooms over the course of my life. I've heard a lot of testimony. I've had strong feelings about possible verdicts at the end of summations. I've certainly had strong feelings about what the obvious and correct verdict is, and only some kind of jury bias can derail this. This is one where I don't have any idea. I'm coming out of this with no ability to read this jury at all. I had a great, this afternoon, I had one of the best views of the jury I've had of the entire trial. By the way, in that courtroom, no one has a good view of every juror. That's impossible in the way the courtroom is laid out. Sometimes you'll have a better view of the back row of jurors if you're on the right side of the room. Other angles have other views of jurors. I've seen all of these jurors at different times and studied them all as much as I could. I can't find anything from any of them, and I offer them that as praise, because that's what they should be delivering to me and to everyone else in the courtroom. They should be delivering nothing. Except their attention where their attention is merited, whether it's the witness stand or the attorney's podium, as it was today. And they are just fully and constantly attentive, more so than any jury I've ever seen. You don't see a moment of them drifting off at any point, even at the times when some of us in the audience might drift off a bit because it might feel like we're going down a tangent. That jury is so attentive and so on point all the way through, and they've never given me the slightest hint, and I haven't heard from anyone else, anybody getting hints about how this jury is feeling. I think that the defense did everything they could do today and throughout the trial to introduce reasonable doubt. And it's always a question of, is that enough reasonable doubt that the defense has introduced for enough jurors? Is it enough reasonable doubt for one juror? Is it enough for 12? I don't know. Did the prosecution present its case beyond a reasonable doubt? I think that could be a very clear and relatively easy finding for this jury. But I come out of it able to tell you, Rachel, I have no idea which way this verdict is going to come out. I won't be surprised by any version of this verdict.
It's fascinating to hear you say that, and I'm glad you've taken the time to do it. I'm sorry to be taking over your hour by making you do this with me. But we're starting to see the first reporting now that is attributing, confidence or hope or worry about jurors to one side or the other in the case. And it feels like wishful thinking and projection by, in this case, the Trump side, than it does more than by anything that seems actually observable in the courtroom. And I feel like that's a good reality check for all of us, that there's nothing, and it was my experience as well being there a couple of days, there's nothing that this jury has done to tell you what they are going to, how they are going to deliberate, or whether any of them is going to act in a bad faith way and force a hung jury when one isn't deserved. And at this point, it really is in the jurors' hands, and this judge has treated them with respect, and they've treated the process with respect, and that's how it's supposed to go. Yeah,
that's absolutely the case. For me, most of the time, in most of the trials I've seen, jury guesswork has been a complete waste of time. Yeah. I have wasted none of my time on that subject in that courtroom.
Right on, Lawrence. Thank you, my friend. Much appreciated. I hope you get some important ibuprofen in your future.
I'm going to need it. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you. Adam, again, to go back to the morning, which was a long time ago for all of us, and Todd Blanche's defense argument, because we're going to cover a lot of prosecution. One of the things I'd say about the prosecution is that the evidence that the prosecution has is very familiar to our audience, because that's been available to us for a very long time. We've been presenting most of it here for a very long time. What we always were sitting around waiting for is, what's the defense? What is the defense of this? And so now that we heard today's most cogent presentation of the Trump defense in this case, Todd Blanche kept coming back to reasonable doubt, reasonable doubt, reasonable doubt. He wasn't going for an innocent. He wasn't going for that. He understood, look, Donald Trump cannot be defended as an innocent person. Donald Trump did stuff within this story that you're not going to like. But did Todd Blanche wedge in enough reasonable doubt for a jury to cling to?
I think the answer to that question helps explain why Josh Steinglass went so long. I think the strongest part of Blanche's presentation was in the morning when he stuck to the law. There was this one part where he was talking about the intent to defraud, and there's one line: there's no other way to characterize an invoice from a lawyer to President Trump than to call it a legal expense. The government has criminalized that, has said that was a crime. What the payroll administrator did, that's absurd. It's not a crime. And he said later, he talked about the mechanics of how these ledger entries were entered. And he pointed out it was a drop-down menu. And presumably from the drop-down menu, there isn't hush money to porn star. So when he resigned himself to the law, that was the strongest part of his defense summation. And I think where things started to go off, and I think where the Steinglass was very effective, is where Blanche started coming along with his rehearsed one-liners, calling Cohen the MVP of lies, the gloat, greatest liar of all time, the living embodiment of reasonable doubt. But he would do that in this kind of scattershot way. And I'm a little biased toward this moment here of what I thought was effective, because I predicted this moment on this show last week, where I said that it seems the defense is pushing this internal inconsistency, this logical inconsistency that's going to be called out by the prosecution, and Steinglass did.
Yes.
And the moment was when charring Cohen as a thief, and that the defense wanted to have it both ways, in the word of the prosecution. And here's what Steinglass said: but in any event, none of this matters, because it's not a defense to the false business records charge that one of the co-conspirators is also guilty of stealing from another. And I will tell you something else that was kind of funny. And Steinglass actually laughed at that moment.
He presented this very well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And said, I don't know if someone caught this during the summation, but Mr. Blanche said, well, he stole $60,000, right? Because it was grossed up. But so that means that the defense is trying to have it both ways. They can call him a thief or claim this wasn't really a reimbursement, but not both.
Right. It's that internal conflict in the defense theories, Andrew, that I've been watching for, which is it's not a reimbursement. That's his paycheck. He earned his paycheck by doing legal work. And as Lisa points out, the DA said today, Michael Cohen spent less time doing legal work for that money than he spent in cross-examination in this courtroom. But so it's not a reimbursement, it's a paycheck. That's one defense argument. And then over here is the other defense argument that in this reimbursement formula, Michael Cohen lied about how much he should be reimbursed. And so he was reimbursed too much. We get to call him a thief because it's reimbursement. But wait a minute, you just called it a paycheck. And now you're saying he's a thief because it's reimbursement.
So in Todd's defense, I do not think it was a good summation, just to be clear.
Was there a way of him see, because I just sat there waiting for him to solve that problem in the case. Was there a way for him to solve it?
So first, it is not uncommon for defense lawyers to have very inconsistent arguments and facts, and because you're only trying to appeal just something to one juror, and you don't know what that one thing will be. So that you are presenting a whole range of things. And unlike sort of an appeal brief where you pick your best, suit and go with that, you really do try to present as much as you can and hope something sticks without saying something ridiculous.
Yeah.
He did. There were a few things where he shouldn't have gone there, where I'm pretty sure it's his client who insisted on it. But the reason I thought there was a real problem and the gift of Todd Blanche to this case and to Josh Steinglass was a little bit like the gift of Costello to Josh Steinglass, which is there is what Todd Blanche addressed and the huge problems with what he did not address. As you've pointed out, nothing in any way cogent about Exhibits 35 and 36, the handwritten notes by Weisselberg.
$130,000.
I mean,
never explained.
Never. I mean,
handwritten by Alan Weisselberg.
Those, everyone knew. We've been sitting here. We've talked about them over and over again. You have to have a theory. If you do not have a theory, your client better be pleading guilty. I mean, you have to have some theory. There was no discussion of Hope Hicks about any of the damaging testimony. Just to use her for some embroidery, but not to deal with the substance. A second problem. David Pecker, again, not dealing with the damaging information. Nothing was said about that. To then say about the Access Hollywood tape, the only thing you're going to say about it is it wasn't a big deal. I mean, again, you have to come up with a better argument or just not address it. So Josh Steinglass was just given all of these gifts because all of that proved nothing was said. And so that is, I mean, I kept on thinking Susan Neckles, who I keep on sort of praising, had to be sitting there dying because
she was physically as far away as she could be. She wasn't just at the end of the regular counsel table. She moved over to where the junior lawyers are to get even farther away today.
And she is the most experienced defense lawyer in that room, other than maybe Susan Hoffinger, who is now in the prosecution side. And you just can't give that closing argument as a defense lawyer. You have to come up with something. And, you know, I'm not sure what I would say about Exhibit 35 and 36, but you have to bring it up. And look, you have to at least say Donald Trump is not on this. You do not know what they said to him or did not say to him. You don't know if Michael Cohen said, don't worry, I've already talked to Donald Trump about it, so you, Alan Weisselberg, don't have to. You have to say something about it to help explain it because you know that they're going to jump all over it. So to me, it's so hard to give them high marks because of what wasn't addressed.
It was so interesting the way Steinglass began because he seemed to be beginning in a purely reactive, and I mean this in a good way, reactive posture from what was just said. Like it didn't look like this was written. It looked like this is I'm going to work off everything you just heard. And his first hour and a half was like direct response.
It was rebuttal. It was very odd. I would not have put, it was rebuttal, then summation. Because of that, I thought it seemed defensive and a little disjointed. No. And I would have.
Oh, I liked it. I really liked it. That's so interesting because I thought, man, that just starts off like a rocket because you know the defenses left me here and you just come back in with bang, 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 knocking them down just like that. And it was very easy to listen to. It was very, very user-friendly.
He's user-friendly. He is so fluid. But didn't you feel, though, like about an hour in, I thought he got much better. Like I thought he became much more just into his work.
Yeah, he got more relaxed, and that's where the little joke sort of things would start to happen. But man, I can just imagine his high school teachers just reading the 75th page of his book report, going, this kid.
I don't think that's what he does normally. No. I don't think he's
not that person. This is a team effort.
I think it's because of this case. I mean, he's known there for just being phenomenal in the courtroom, and that he would not be sort of over trying it.
Yeah. And I think it's an enormous amount of evidence. I mean, they're putting it all together, and I remember all of those charts with the timeline. Just when you ferret out all of the well-placed phone calls, emails, text messages, you see this massive amount of evidence. It's going to go long.
Did you hear my point about the charts? So if you looked at their demonstratives in the lower right corner, they were at like 420 in their slides at one point. Now, they got to take some of them out. But the fact that there
it might be like Todd's 70. Can you believe Todd went back and said, there were 70 calls between
And said it
Cohen and
again?
Costello.
Even after that got contradicted by his
I was like, dude,
Well, they were-
stop with the 70. Like,
They're partially double counted, but they're like double counted in the way that if you animate something and something moves, right? So like each new data point is a separate slide, but still 420 of them in a summation, that's a whole
yeah.
But the
heck of
whole
a
like
lot.
numerology of all this kind of shows the difference of styles. You have the 10-pointed list of Todd Blanche,
I think that was
and
the
then
best
this.
thing he did, actually, was the 10 points, because at least
Yeah, I
the jury
did
is
too,
going to
yeah.
be like, okay, I want answers for all of that, and it puts the burden on the prosecution to be like, okay, I have to make sure I deal with that.
But his slides were so disconnected from his presentation. It was like two separate groups of people prepared them,
Oh,
right?
totally. This, you definitely felt like somebody else was like, and here are your 10 points.
Right, and here are your
Totally.
slides, and he just kept iterating
Also,
and revising.
the 10 were 4. I mean, I was just like,
Right.
He chose it because it was a round number, whereas everything that Steinglass chose felt like the messy reality, which is why it was so messy.
I thought the best part of his summation was when he said, let me tell you why he's not a rogue. And he
Right.
sort of
Yeah.
argued. And it was like, here are all the arguments.
I love that imagined 49 seconds. It was really,
Loved
really
it.
Such
cool.
a great way to do it.
It was a
You
great
knew, you knew that he had to think of some way, and I just thought he'd count 93 seconds.
Right,
This was
right.
just such a lovely way to do it, and it was so much shorter. That's
Yeah.
the thing. I was like, okay, that's great.
it
And
was
his
done as
personality in that performance moment, by the way, was very winning, and you know, a lot of people couldn't pull that off.
well. Did you hear his witness store line, Andrew? Because it made me
Yeah.
think of you.
Yeah. That's like
Because that's
like
standard, but like I'd never heard anybody use that line before. And then just go pick them up at the witness store.
That's like a,
Cliche line.
and it works. I thought one of the lines that I loved was on Cohen, and when he was arguing why he would have told Trump, he was like, on this whole idea of pushing Stormy Daniels' payment past the election, he goes, you think Michael Cohen would have the audacity to make that decision on his own? And in case it would and that would
Right.
backfire?
Right.
He said, you think that would be something that Michael Cohen would be able to do?
Because Pecker
I mean,
told you he couldn't buy
Like,
lunch.
I mean, it was just such a great way of being like you just went, well, of course Donald Trump would have to be the person who said, see if you can put it off. Because first of all, Michael Cohen was like, just pay it.
Right.
Right? Like something so cheap, like you gotta pay the money. But it was just so good to think he would not have that audacity.
You know what else was good
and
about that?
just worked all the way through it.
Yeah.
The Cohen-Davidson call from October of 17, when he says he
Yeah.
was not even remotely a cooperator at this point,
Totally.
and he's telling
He's still
Davidson
saying the same thing.
every time we talk about it, he says, I hate that we did this, and I remind him, everyone you talk to about it tells you you had to do it. But
Right.
like the point is, like at that point in time,
Right.
he had no reason to manufacture that.
Right. It was just.
That was good.
That's where I really do think it was useful. I mean, I know it was long, and the general view is it was too long. I just don't. I think it's a different standard because of the problem of what the jury might want here. I mean, I just really do think that they are
Well,
worried
you're
about
an
that.
opera fan, so there's no such thing as too long.
No, that's,
Right?
I hate Wagner. Right? Like, wait, I just think they're really worried about the jury holding them to a higher standard.
Right. And I think there was a.
And by the
You
way,
know.
they will be held to a higher standard.
Yes,
It's
but
implicitly
that is
part
why
of this.
Todd said that. That
Yeah.
is why Todd. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
good argument. I mean, it's a good thing to say no matter what. I mean, it's improper, but it happens all the time.
Right.
In this case, in particular, you saw it with Judge Merchan saying, "I don't want to put you in jail." Right? I mean,
Yeah, and I completely agree with you that this prosecution would have met the burden with this evidence with any other non-privileged defendant. If this was
Right,
some other
exactly.
business case and the jury had no idea who this defendant was, I don't see an issue. I do think it's a weighty thing for this jury. You know, they're going to feel the weight of that verdict, which is why, by the way, I thought that thing about you can't send them to prison. For me, and I hope we get to it and read it. I think we have it here somewhere. Yeah, I got it here. When he says the last line of the written curative instruction is, a prison sentence is not required for the charges in this case in the event of a guilty verdict. That's the worst news the the defense could possibly allow that jury to know. You just lifted their burden. You just went, oh, okay. So we can find him guilty, and he doesn't go to prison.
Right. So that particular part of the instruction is not normal.
No, I know.
That is like
I know. That final line.
But you understand that came from the prosecution.
I know,
And the defense didn't object.
But they could have objected to the
should have.
final line.
They should have objected to that last line.
That final sentence.
But you could see where Sean's going, no objection, I'm giving it. Like, that was one word.
Yeah,
He's like, let's go.
Yeah.
Like, that's like, okay, no objection, like, I'm not waiting.
Yeah.
That was a mistake.